The sun is out, the birds are chirping, the weather is warming up, and finally we can start thinking about getting out into the garden. But let's say you don't have a garden yet. Let's say you want to build a new one, or let's say you want to enhance your existing space. If that's you, then this video is for you. Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Tanya. I garden in Zone 5B/6 just outside of Chicago, and today I am in my friend's front yard. My friend would like to build a brand new garden space in her front yard that gets full sun all day long, except for in the morning. So there's some important things to consider when planning this space. We want to think about spacing of the beds, access to water, and placement of the beds in relation to the shadow line that occurs from a fence just on her property. So I'll be walking through exactly what I'll be doing step by step, and even better, I'll be using the Epic Garden Planner, which is a really great app by Epic Gardening that allows me to plan the layout of the garden exactly as we'd like it, just to avoid any mistakes that can possibly happen when planning a garden space. And a lot of things can go wrong. If you watch one of my recent videos, I talked about some of the mistakes I made when planning my own raised bed garden space, and I made some pretty big ones. I placed my beds too close to the fence line, so I don't have enough space to harvest along the fence when vegetables are ready to go. I also didn't install a drip shutoff in each of my beds, so that's posed a big problem for me when I have to water and turn over crops in my beds. So with my friend's garden space, using this app will make it much more easy and effective, and we'll be able to see everything exactly as she would like it before actually placing any bed or doing any of the labor. So let's take a look at the space and let me show you what we're working with. This is my friend's front yard. The front yard is pretty sizable. It's on the side of her house. She is working with a fence line right here, and this direction is east. So we need to be mindful of the sun and exactly the direction that we want to place the beds in relation to the sun. Now we also have a large shadow line here, and it's about 9:30 in the morning right now. So that is something that we'll need to think about when placing the beds. Now her kids typically play in this area here, so she wants to actually place her garden bed here. This place gets nailed with afternoon and evening sun, which is west facing this way. So I think we'll be okay in terms of light. But one of the important things to think about when I plan this garden for her is the placement of the beds in relation to this fence line, because as you can see, this is a pretty big shadow line. Now, it is early in the season. It's only mid-March, right? So as the season progresses, the shadow line will get shorter because the sun will be higher in the sky. So it still is important, but not as crucial as it is right now. This is a fairly large shadow line. This is about 12 to 15 feet right now. But as the season progresses, this shadow line will likely get shorter. Now, she would like to have the garden space kind of framed out in a square of about 16 feet wide this way and 15 feet deep. So that's pretty much the space we have to work with right here, because like I said, her kids play in the rest of the front yard, and we want to make sure that they still have the space to play. She would like raised vegetable beds, and she wants to do a lot of vegetable gardening. So I'm envisioning a series of beds here just to give her all of the garden space she's looking for, probably incorporating some vertical gardening elements because it is a somewhat small space, and also even leveraging the fence here as vertical gardening space, maybe with some trellises so she can grow pole beans or anything vertically that she can tie in. Now we do have a pretty strong rabbit pressure around here, so she will likely be going with a higher elevated bed to work with. Here is another angle of the space where we'll be designing the bed. So this is a really good area, and I think if we keep it over on this side, by the time 11 o'clock or noon rolls around during the summertime, and she'll have a lot of full sun here to work with. So now that we've seen the space, let's head back to the house and design this garden together using the Epic Garden Planner. It's such a cool tool. I think you're really going to like it because it allows us to create a vision of the garden exactly as we would like it. Let's go. All right, friends, so we are back home in my basement now. I'm in front of my laptop. Let's check out the Epic Garden Planner and plan this garden. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new garden plan. I can either create a template, but since I have a blank slate I'm working from, I'm going to go ahead and create a new garden plan. I'm going to name it My Friend's Vegetable Garden. I think I'll stick with the imperial metrics here and enter the dimensions of the garden as we know it, right? It's about 16 feet width and 15 feet in length. So it's really easy here. I can enter the exact measurements and then create a new plan based on that information. And look at that. I have a brand new template here in a grid format, and each square represents a foot. And that's the great thing about this template. It is by foot, so it's really easy to lay out your measurements and to get your template going in a very simple and easy to use format. So since we're creating a brand new space, I want to go ahead and add all the foundational objects first, just so that we know what kind of foundation we're working with. And on the left-hand side, I have garden objects to choose from. I've got plants to choose from. I've got shapes to choose from and text that I can enter. That's the nice thing about this as well. So now let's go ahead and add the fence. That's a one foundation object that we know we cannot move and it will be in place. So I've got a number of different fences here to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and pick that 6-foot tall picket fence and put it on the east side of her property line. Notice here it allows me to draw a really nice straight line. I love that. It's very easy to use. Now, let's go ahead and add a compass. I think that would be a really good idea, just so we know what direction we're working with when planning out this garden space. That's especially important when we're talking about adding garden beds and placing them in relation to the sun, and we're working with a shadow line. So really important to know the direction that we're headed and facing in our garden. So let's go and put a compass here. And this is a true compass here. The directions are correct. The fence is on the east side of her property. So good to have this on hand here just as a visual. Now, she also mentioned that she'll be enclosing this space. So I thought it would be nice to put some type of brick edging. She won't be adding a fence, but really just more or less like edging or some type of paved stones just to delineate the space and really make it formally a garden and identified as a garden. So let's go ahead and type in pavers or edging and add some of that to the foundation here. Okay, great. I have some brick edging. I'm going to go ahead and drag it along the border, and notice here, look, it says 15 feet, 11 inches. That's perfect. That's the exact dimensions that she gave us. And that's what's really nice about this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put this all along the border of the property or border of the garden and really enclose it and make it nice and cozy. And what I think I'm going to do is actually make a formal entryway into the garden on the south side of this garden, because the south side is closest to her door that she'll likely come out of, her front door, to access her garden. She can easily go into this doorway that I'm creating here. And I'm going to make it right around 4 feet wide. That's a good rule of thumb for any doorway into a garden or an aisle, because it will allow her to bring a wagon through, a wheelbarrow, some gardening supplies, tools, whatever it might be that she needs to bring into the garden space. We'll go ahead and create a 4 foot wide entryway. And I can see that because it's simply 4 squares. So I know that it's 4 feet. And another thing I was thinking of doing, which I think would be a really beautiful way to enhance her garden space, is add an arch trellis. I think that would just be gorgeous to include that at the front of her garden space. So it really creates a formal and inviting entryway that's a focal point in the garden. So I am going to go ahead and type in arch or arbor. Perfect. So here is an arbor. I'm going to go and place that at the front of her garden, and it just creates such a beautiful, inviting place and space into her garden, really formalizes the entryway. And the added bonus here is that she can use the arbor for vertical gardening. So she can continue to leverage that vertical space and grow cucumbers up this, or even flowers if she would like to beautify the space. And that's the great thing about arbors, or incorporating any type of trellis arbors into a garden, so that you can leverage that vertical space and really make the most out of what is actually a small garden space. I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more formal plants here. I'm going to go and add a boxwood just to add a little bit more formality, a little bit more structure to the front entryway of her garden, and place them on either side of the arbor trellis. That's such a beautiful plant, and it really provides a foundation and kind of weights the front entrance and just lures the person into the garden, makes it that much more inviting. The nice thing about boxwoods is they're super hardy, very easy to go. They thrive in many different conditions, and they are a very hardy perennial in our area here. Okay, next I want to actually add a path, because if we're going to do this, let's go ahead and design the whole thing. I'm going to add a brick path here just to create a little bit of a formal entryway into the garden space. That way it's very clearly delineated. This is the garden. This is where we go to relax, to harvest vegetables, just to create that much of a more cozy, inviting atmosphere for my friend and for her family. I'm going to go ahead and send it to the back. That way it's underneath and layered underneath the arbor trellis. That's a really nice feature of this application. It's very clear that this is a path underneath the trellis, and I love it. It's already looking so pretty. Okay, next it's time to place the raised beds. Now, my friend did mention that she wants to purchase the Epic Gardening Birdies beds. We were tossing around small or medium sizes. They are modular, so they come in a number of different preset configurations. I'm going to go with the small size. I think that is actually the best size selection for this space. I don't want it to be so crowded that, it just is not working for her to walk in or walk around the garden beds. We want to make sure that there is enough space for her to walk around the garden beds, harvest her vegetables, because the plants really will grow quite large during the growing season. So I'm going to go and change this back to the 3x4 size. I really like that size proportionately. I think it works really well for the space. It's very balanced, and I think it just fits. So I'm going to go ahead and place this evenly, and I think I'm going to put another one to the right-hand side of this. I think proportionately it will work. Now I am placing it about 1.5 feet away from her border, which if this were fenced in would be much too close. But since she's not fencing in this space and just kind of putting edging around it, this placement here is perfect because she can still step on the edging or even beyond the edging to harvest her vegetables. I'm placing another garden bed to the right of it. I think creating an aisle down the middle will be beautiful. And what I would also like to do is leverage more vertical gardening space in the middle and connect the two beds with a vertical arch in the same way that I did at the front entryway of the garden. So this way she can really leverage her vertical gardening space. She can use the trellis to grow cucumbers, beans, really anything can be grown vertically. And that's the great thing about this. So this arch here is fantastic. I think this is beautiful, and it really just creates such a beautiful formal space in her garden. And I've grown butternut squash, cucumbers, watermelon, all vertically. And even though the crops, the fruit themselves are quite heavy, the stems are actually very strong. So as long as that crop is tied in with like a rubber twine, for example, that crop will be protected and will grow vertically. And that way she kind of gets another whole garden bed on this trellis. And I just think this layout is already looking really pretty. Very, very pretty. Now, I think I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this exact design and create another row here. And by doing that, she has 4 garden beds and 2 trellises and a really beautiful walkway that she can walk through and go to the garden. And I just think it creates such an aesthetically pleasing space while also being very functional. So I'm going to go and place the garden beds right around 2 feet apart. That's kind of the ideal width, the rule of thumb in between garden aisles. Again, this allows you to kind of maneuver in between the rows. You could go a little bit further, that would be great. But since we're working with a pretty small space, I'm going to go about 2 feet wide, and that will allow her to harvest her vegetables and walk through with ease. Now, there is plenty of room in the front of the garden bed here, but I don't think I'm going to put a 3rd row of garden beds because I think that would actually get pretty crowded. But we can leverage container gardening here. This is a great way to put in some slim containers that I think would allow her to plant carrots or any other type of vegetables here in the front entryway. So I'm going to go ahead and place slim containers here right at the front that I think will really allow her to leverage the maximum amount of gardening space and also really give a little bit more structure, a little bit more weight to the front entryway of her garden and really formalize and enclose that space. So there's a number of containers to choose from here. I'm going to go ahead and pick this slim one. I think this would be really pretty. And I think that the dimensions are fairly customizable. So let's go ahead and drag one here and see how it looks. Okay, so I'm going to make it about 4 feet by a foot wide. So it's 4 feet long and 1 foot deep. That's a sizable garden bed. And if I create another one of these on the other side of the arbor, I think it will just really create a nice balanced look. So I'm going to easily copy and paste this on the other side. And there we go. She's got another set of garden beds to work with. Now I'm really liking the way this is looking. The front entryway is looking beautiful, very formal, and really just designated garden space. I do think we can add a few more structural pieces here just to continue to cozy this space, make it really cozy and inviting, and just leverage all the gardening space that she has. So now I want to go ahead and leverage more of her vertical garden space along her fence line. So I'm searching for trellises here. I only see beam supports, so I don't see a grid either. I think as a placeholder, I'm going to go ahead and use a fence just to put it along the fence, and that can kind of be a placeholder for a vertical garden trellis that we can suspend from the fence. I'm thinking kind of like a metal grid, something where she can grow things up and vertically that are nice and tight and compact. Pole beans come to mind, cucumbers, something really small that she can plant along the fence line so we can really leverage that fence space. Now, remember the fence is facing east, so it will be in a shadow during the morning. But with our afternoon and evening sun, that wood will really be baked during the evening and afternoon hours, and it will be very hot. So I anticipate that there will be a lot of heat refraction that the plants can absorb, and I think they will be okay. In fact, I think they might just benefit from a little bit of shade protection in the morning. So I'm placing 3 trellises here along the fence line that gives her even more gardening or vertical gardening space. So let's just put some pole beans along there to see what it looks like and drag that there. And the cool thing about this is that as I drag it, it gives me the exact amount of plants I need in the space I'm working with. So it says 6 plants for a 3-foot space. That's what another thing that I love about this application is that it gives me the exact amount of space and plants that I need using the square foot gardening method. So super simple, really concise, and I love that about it. So let's say her family loves beans. Let's go ahead and add some more along the trellises that I've hung on the fence for her vertical garden area. And I just think this is starting to really come together. I'm going to go ahead and add a few more containers, this time circular containers around the edges of the garden just to really cozy it in, create those foundational pieces that really define the space and make it clear that this is the garden space while also giving her the opportunity to plant more things in these containers. So she can plant small fruit trees, other crops, anything else, flowers, just to beautify this space. I'm really liking the way the 3 containers look. I think that provides a really nice balanced look and really encloses the space and defines it, especially since there is no fence surrounding this garden. It's just an enclosed area with defined pavers, really. So the containers just add some extra border and enclosure to define the space. And I'm just placing these. I think this is starting to look beautiful. It's really balanced. It's just gorgeous. I love this. So let's go ahead and add some plants now to our garden beds. Let's add some tomatoes. Her family loves tomatoes. She's a big cook, so I know tomato sauce is a big staple in their house. I can add tomatoes here. See, we have 2 tomato plants for a 3 by 2 inch space. That is fantastic. Gives me the exact amount that I can plant. I'm going to go ahead and put the exact plant on the other side just to keep it symmetrical and to give her the option to add some more tomatoes. Next up, I want to add some water. I'm guessing her water source is closest to her garage and her fence line on the northeast side. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert a square shape that is blue, indicating that this is the water source for her garden. And again, this is just a great feature of the application. We can really call out any special objects or elements in the garden space that we need to be aware of, like water or maybe like a container, anything really that you have to be mindful of in the garden space. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and add some lettuce to the garden beds. Let's see how many lettuce plants we can fit into one Birdie's small raised bed. So I'm going to drag and drop it in there, and then it should tell me exactly how many plants I can plant in there. So I see I have 9 plants available in a 3-foot space. That's fantastic. That's really packed in there, and they should do wonderfully. So this will give her a really good example of what her garden layout can look like, what type of plants she can plant in there, and the types of containers that she can have. And she can see the exact dimensions of each of the containers and the exact dimensions of her walkways and her path. So it's a great option and a great feature when you're designing a brand new garden space or an existing one. Really gives you all of the details that you might need in one single application. I think this is just really cool. It's super user-friendly, really intuitive, and really great to use. I'd highly recommend it. I love the layout of this garden. I think it's really beautiful. I think it will enhance the front yard and just create such an aesthetically pleasing space and be a nice place for her to go to. I hope you enjoyed that garden planning with me. It was a lot of fun. My friend actually did decide to purchase the Epic Gardening Birdie's beds in the size small. I think it's going to be really beautiful. She is using my coupon code. Be sure to use that. I'll put it in the description below. Definitely check out the website. It's a really good website, and the planner is fantastic. They have a trial for 7 days that you can try for free, so I'd highly recommend. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to stay tuned for the next video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.